everybody, it's T Falcon Napier. Welcome to the coaching sessions for the Oracle of Self-Explorers. Today, there's a couple of things I want to review with everyone, and then I want to actually take you step by step through a process that we use when it comes to creating these ChangeWorks profiles and working with our clients. And so on the screen right now, you should be seeing that cheat sheet quick reference guide for the 5 different levels of tension. And so just in case you guys don't have it handy, let me go ahead and chat it over to everybody again. And I have a couple of others I'm going to chat your way in just a second too. So let me chat this over here. That is the quick reference guide. If you don't already have it, there it is. But one thing that I wanted to kind of make sure people are aware of is the importance of recognizing your own level of productive tension before you embark on any sort of a change process, any sort of even an exploration or consideration of what might be going on.
I always tell my leaders, if you can't manage your own tension, you can't manage anybody else's.
It's exactly right, because if you're not in the right spot, the right level of tension, then the chances are very strong that you're going to do wrong things. And so let's just quickly review why that's the case. So where on the change grid should you be to be making the best possible decisions to, as you learned last time around, to walk the path in a very proper and productive kind of way? I mean, where on the grid are people going to do the best job of figuring out what needs to be done and then, following through with a plan and executing the plan? So
Power
they need to
stress.
be empowered to power stress. And there, we're on a continuum here. So there's always a little bit of wiggle room, but genuinely, we really want people to start off in power. Now, think about this for just a second. I want all of you to think about the clients that you've had in the past and the kind of work you've done with them. How often does a client actually walk into your office or, start the call and they're nowhere near power? So we end up talking to clients who, instead of coming to us for a discussion or a session in this place of power, they're coming to us in a place of stress. And because they're entering the conversation in stress, we got 2 tasks now we have to do. Anyone want to tell me? I mean, most of you on the call are certified ChangeWorks pros. So what do you have to do if someone walks into
Gotta
your...
lower their tension.
I've got to, first of all, get them out of stress. Because as long as they are up in stress, I'm going to be hearing a whole lot of words that may or may not be useful, applicable, real, meaningful. I mean, there's a lot of distortion of reality that comes along with being up in stress. So I have to get them out of stress, and then I have to do the real work. If they'd come to me in power, we could have just gotten right down, cut to the chase, deal with whatever the issue is, walk the path in a very logical kind of way. I mean, lots of good work happens very quickly when we have clients that are in power. But very, very often, even with clients we've worked with for a very long time, they're going to enter up in stress. And we have to do something to get them out of stress so they can see the situation from a more detached, objective kind of perspective. Sometimes they're not that far gone. They're not way up in stress. Maybe they're in power stress. And that's certainly a step in the right direction, but there's still that element of emotions that might be clouding whatever their judgment, and they might be in a hurry to get to some decision, some outcome that it would really benefit them more if they would just slow down. We talk about this sometimes. To go faster, you have to slow down. And for the work that we do, we need to get people into more of these mid-range of tension. Now, they're unlikely to come to you, but how often have we been assigned someone to work with who we've, didn't really maybe even participate in the choice of working with a coach or whatever. Maybe some of you are working with people that are in the working their way through the court system. So they've been assigned to you, but they're not coming to you in power. They may be coming to you in apathy. They may have stress about other things, but as far as doing the work that you are there to do with them, they could be down in apathy, where they are exhibiting all of these kinds of characteristics. So they believe their resources are unlimited. They're running on autopilot. Do something. I don't need to do anything. Everything's are just fine, just the way they are. So there's some denial going on here, an illusion of control. As long as they stay downgrade, they can be very unproductive. I will tell you that by definition, anyone who's in apathy is very unlikely to seek out the support or guidance of a professional, maybe not even the support and guidance of their closest friends and family members. So, because they're in apathy, they're downgrade, they don't really care one way or another. They think everything is just fine. And so we say that if you're going to be using these techniques for your own personal growth and development, or to work with someone near and dear to you, maybe you have a ChangeWorks partner, maybe you're in a different kind of a situation, but you're going to be doing this more from the layperson's perspective than from the professional's perspective. That really doesn't change the workload. It just puts the burden on you to be able to recognize what the workload is and do things accordingly. So I want to make sure that you are all able to recognize what level of productive tension you are experiencing at any given moment in time about that specific situation. Never forget, the change grid is activity specific. So we don't generalize this to the whole person, or we try not to, but we don't want to generalize this to the whole person. We want to say, no, as far as this situation is concerned, at this particular moment in time, this is what they're experiencing. Or to be more oracle the self, as far as this situation is concerned, at this particular moment in time, this is where I am on the change grid. It's vitally important that you recognize when you are up in stress. And so let's quickly review some of these qualities, and then you can tell me why that is not a good place for you to dwell when it comes to actually resolving whatever it is that ails you. So up in stress, I know I need to do something, but I don't know what to do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Very often people who are up in stress about a situation feel as though they have no resources. We're over here. They feel as though they have scarce resources. They are feeling very much out of control. They're experiencing these unresourceful emotions of anger, grief, fear, and shame that can be distorting reality, feeding upon themselves. An angry person is likely to become angrier. A fearful person is likely to become more frightened if something is not done to help break the momentum that they are experiencing about that, the expression and the experience of those particular emotions. Sooner or later, panic sets in. They feel as though they have no way to go. They might even start to feel as though there's forget them. There's nothing, like the whole system is kind of broken, that everything around them. So we haven't talked about this yet, but I'll briefly throw out that one of the things that we explore a lot in tension management is the topic of resilience. How easily does someone bounce back whenever something has come along and upset them, disrupted life as they know it, etc. So this whole idea about resilience. Well, there's a researcher, his name's Seligman. I believe he's still alive. He did tremendous work. I think he's considered to be the father of positive psychology, but Seligman is his name. And he put together some very interesting tools. Well, one of them has to do with resilience. And he said that when people find themselves in difficult, challenging, whatever situations, if they are not able to see things more clearly and bounce back more readily, they're going to get lost in one or a combination of three beliefs. And so these are worth writing down, although we will get into it in more detail as our discussions continue. So the three beliefs are that, number one, someone believes that whatever it is that's happening is permanent. And so they will say things like, things are just never going to change. This is it. We're doomed. Nothing's ever going to, this idea that whatever is going on is in fact permanent. Nothing will ever change it. And so that belief that the person holds when they're up in stress is that gloom, doom, death, and despair, because now that X is happening, it's going to destroy things forever. So there's this belief that whatever it is that's going on, it's futility, etc. The second belief they may move into is that they believe that it's pervasive. So it isn't just this one situation that we now believe is permanent. We might believe that that situation is in turn going to contaminate this and this and this. And so a whole slew of new problems get mobilized. And if they add to that feeling that it's pervasive, it's actually spreading through everything. If they now add to that this belief in permanence, they may believe that not only is this one thing doomed, but everything ends up being doomed. Then we get to the third belief, and this one you might think is not all that common, but in fact, it's probably the more prevalent of the three, is this, they call it personalization. At a certain point in time, the person believes that not only are these issues permanent, not only are they pervasive, but it's somehow or another their fault. Somehow or another, they believe that they should be able to do something to fix it. They should be able to convince others. They should be able to sway whatever it is that's really going on. So although they're not going to go like, it's completely my fault, they are going to become very critical of how they have carried themselves, presented themselves, how they're dealing with it, how they're really mobilizing their energies and their resources to do something. And they start to feel like, I coulda, shoulda, woulda, if I'd only done X. And so this idea that whatever is going on is somehow or another their fault, that it either happened or that it's continuing to happen, or that will always be the thing to happen. So there's this stage that people will move through where they start to relinquish their power purely by denying that they have the power. So they're abandoning it, they're relinquishing it to the universe, to whatever. And so if we have a client who comes in and that's the kind of language that we're hearing, that there is an issue, no one's denying that an issue exists. The issue exists. How you feel about the issue is really quite optional. So, that's very changeable, but the issue is whatever the issue actually happens to be. Well, if they come in and you start hearing them say things like, my God, this is never going to change. It's always been this way. It's always going to be this way. If you hear them say things like, and now this is happening and this is falling apart and that means this is going to go on and blah, 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 you're going to end up with someone who has, I'm going to say, not lost their resilience, but for some reason or another has set aside the skills of resilience. So you're all welcome to unmute and chime in if you've got a story you'd like to share. Never hesitate to participate on the calls. This is, I call it a coaching call because it's about you. And so you feel free to ask whatever questions you have, give whatever insights you wish to share. Don't let me ever hold you back. I do know I talk a lot and I talk fast. Please interrupt me. I do need to breathe and take a drink of water once in a while. So how many of you ever had a client walk in and that's where they're at?
Yeah, I have.
Yep.
I have. I actually, one of my, the head of claims for one of my insurance carriers takes every loss personally. Mm-hmm. And every loss just drives him deeper into, geez, what do I do?
Yep. And so it ends up making look, the word right here, emotional state, unresourceful, anger, grief, fear, and shame. That personalization part of it is that shame piece. So somehow or another feeling embarrassed or inadequate or somehow or another less than who they feel they should be or who they're projecting to be. Well, all that reasoning is just coming from emotions. They're a long way from logic. So as long as we've got a client who is up here, we know that any time they spend there is going to be counterproductive. Remember that all of these things travel as a set. You don't get to be up in stress and in a panic and being angry and emotional and blah, 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 and not end up wasting time and resources. The answers that you seek, the answers that you perhaps actually need, are not available to you while you are up in stress. And so if you're going to apply this to yourself, the very first thing you need to do is recognize what's going on with your personal level of tension about that situation in that particular moment. And if you realize, if you can recognize just by these attributes alone, if you can recognize that you are up in stress, it is time to stop exploring the issue and start to do something to manage your own level of productive tension. Now, we'll get into the specific techniques we apply to reduce the level of tension, but I will tell you that when we get to that, we call them change grid maneuvers. When we're teaching this as a regular, full-blown kind of class, I actually say to people, you may not realize it, but over the course of your entire lifetime, you've become highly skilled at tension management. Tension management is life. Everything that happens all around us every day requires us to understand and address varying levels of tension that we're experiencing in ourselves and in others. And so I promise you that if I put you into one of our classes and I said to you, now, before I tell you how we lower tension, just picture this for a second. You got somebody who's really stressed out and they're all upset about whatever, and they're going on and on about whatever. They're telling you they're out of control. They don't have the resources. It's all, all this stuff is going on. If I just said to you, what kinds of things do you do to lower the tension of someone who's around you? What do you do? And forget the techniques that we teach in case you know them, don't rattle them off. What kinds of things do we just know as far as a human interacting with another human? How do we go about reducing someone else's levels of productive tension?
I'd say that what we do is we tell them everything is going to be okay. Don't worry, I'm here. You've got, we've all been through this before.
Yeah, so we want to reassure people. We want to normalize whatever they're experiencing so that they realize they are not alone. As far as telling them it's all going to turn out okay, well, maybe, but certainly we want to let them know that people have been here before and they came out of it fine and dandy. And so point to those kinds of experiences that if they haven't had personally, they perhaps have witnessed in somebody else, and that can help them lower their level of tension. T, I see you unmuted. How else might we lower someone's level of tension?
Sometimes what I do is just start intentionally breathing differently, or trying to get them to breathe with me. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but usually their breath is pretty shallow.
Yep.
And I ask them, so how are you breathing right now? And I just know that works. So that's just one thing.
Right.
Another thing might be trying to change the question in your head. What's a question in your head right now that you're thinking about?
Very good. Very good. Let me point out for everyone that this idea about breathing, each level of productive tension has its own breathing pattern associated with it. And it has a lot to do with the speed of breathing, with the depth of the breaths that are being taken. And it's true that when you're up in stress, breaths are very quick and tend to be quite shallow. That, by the way, physiologically is boosting your primal instincts a bit. So you're feeling a lot more apprehension. It's actually creating a certain amount of anxiety. At the very least, it's supporting the level of anxiety that you're feeling. Where if we go all the way downgrade, down in apathy, breathing rate down in apathy is very slow. Could be very deep, but generally we become more of an abdominal breather when we're down in apathy, because this is where we sleep. And I think you guys realize that when you are sleeping, you're not a chest breather. You're not taking deep, full breaths. Those are things we do more intentionally, or if it's being triggered autonomically, it's because those deep breaths can be very cleansing. So if our body is detecting that there's too much carbon dioxide in whatever our mix is that's in our lungs, it may very well say, it doesn't need to tell you to do it. It's just going to do it. It's going to take a very deep breath and let you empty it completely. So this is what sighing is all about. Lots of things are happening breath-wise. T is absolutely correct. Up in stress, they are exhibiting a breathing pattern that is going to fortify this stress response that they're going through. If we can change their breathing pattern, we can change their level of productive tension. So for those who are thinking about applying this to self, just know that if you're up in stress, although it sounds very like every magazine has talked about it in every article on stress management, it tells you, take a few deep breaths, whatever. It's not hoo-ha, it's true. So, breathe it, just breathe it out, breathe it out, breathe it out. Anyone want to throw anything else you want to do before I rattle off a dozen or more? Anybody? Yeah, okay. These are things you all do. You let people talk it out, because the thought is that if they can get the words out, if they can get these feelings out, maybe once they're out, they have a very different internal kind of frame around it. So they said what they needed to say, they're venting whatever they need to vent. Once that's over and done with, now their tension will go down and we can get on with whatever needs to happen next. That said, how many of you have ever had a client that entered with a stress response state that you wanted them to just naturally work their way through, and at a certain point you became very conscious that the session time is ticking away and not a whole lot of constructive stuff has happened? Anybody deal with those or had that situation?
I have, and the thing of it is, you think, so I sometimes ask a question: is this where you would like to go with this right now?
Yeah, very good. Let them choose.
Yeah.
So you want to stay with these feelings, stay with this, I don't even know what to call it. I don't want to call it venting. That's a judgment word. But, do they want to continue on that track, or would they like to find themselves in a different place that might serve them better?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but that's absolutely right. Now, again, we could talk just as much about people that are down in apathy, because I promise you, there are infinitely more people that are in apathy out there on our planet than there are people up in stress. Stress gets the attention because stress draws attention to itself. Apathy tends to be under the radar. And again, our rule, you can take this one to the bank. People pay attention to where they find their tension. And so whoever this person is that's down in apathy about whatever the issue happens to be, they could be up in stress and power apathy about a whole combination of other things. Well, as long as they're busy with things that cause them greater levels of tension, they may never get around to the stuff that's further downgrade. And so
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, David.
Can we use the change grid to build resilience?
We can certainly use the change grid as a tool as we're helping people build greater resilience, because it's the tool that's going to reflect to the person like a mirror what's currently going on that is undermining their resilience, or what's going on where we want to say, like I want to say to the person who's up in stress, if they're already aware of some resilience kinds of techniques, I would say to them, it's time for you to do those resilience techniques. Because nothing good, I promise you, nothing good is going to come from decision making that's coming out of stress. Again, we have a stress response because it can save our butt if we're being chased by an animal, but the things that we deal with every single day are not really about actual physical survival. It could be about other issues that are in the long term related to someone's survival, like if it's things to do with, like if you've got a business owner who's really concerned about revenue coming in and all that, they've got good reason to be concerned. I don't want to diminish the stress. I just want to say to them, in order for us to deal with this issue most effectively, we need to come at it from the most advantageous level of tension. So you got to manage your own level of tension, or those that are professionals, we have to manage the client's level of tension before we could actually do any real work for fixing whatever their situation happens to be. That being said, we've had many clients who are so stressed out, but I want to say that it's not just stress that's really going on, that it continues for multiple sessions. And sometimes those of you that are applying this to yourself, you might notice that you're lingering in a stress state that will come and go, but the moment you start thinking about that situation, all the stress is back. And so it's this thing that is a recurring sort of an episode. These people are not just stressed out. There's kind of a level where it becomes its own torment. Yeah, and again, you guys can unmute and chime in on this if you really want, but it becomes this inescapable kind of thought and feeling that they end up perseverating on. It perseveres, it keeps sticking around and coming back over and over. And so it's also quite possible when we're working with a client that it may take multiple sessions with them just to help them find their own power again, to help them find that resilience, to bounce back from this so they can start to look at the situation more objectively, etc. We do know that people up in stress, or forget that the stress response state has as its hallmark a distortion of reality. And so it's going to feed upon itself. That doesn't mean there aren't real facts. There really isn't evidence that that is true in whatever the situations they're experiencing, but they may be bestowing upon that a lot more of that power, or as we said before, permanence. It spreads to others. It perseverates. Permanence. Pervasiveness, that it's not as pervasive as they think it is. We need to help them recognize and challenge the underlying beliefs that they hold about whatever that situation happens to be. Do you think we can do that work while somebody's still up in stress? David, you're the one who's unmuted right now, so a burden of answer falls on your shoulders.
Well, I don't think so, but I'm thinking of people who get like a really bad diagnosis and they feel out of control and up in stress, and I'm wondering what we can do for them.
Yeah, well, if I rattle off I won't put you guys through the test, but at least half of you on the call right now should be able to rattle off the top of your head the downgrade maneuvers. But the downgrade maneuvers are the following four: normalize, simplify, restore resources, add resources. So we've done a lot of work with people who are working in like a clinical or hospital setting, usually social workers who are helping people adjust to the illness. So if they've received one of those diagnoses, what can the world of social workers do to help that person? Well, a lot of it has to do with resource management. So what if I said to that person, I know that this is the first time you're experiencing this, but, and I want to normalize it, this is actually something that we deal with, unfortunately, every day, as we have for many, many years. Now, just taking the edge off of someone's stress, so just normalizing it is not going to move them from stress all the way down to apathy, but it may very well take the edge off a little bit, because if nothing else, the person in that moment may say, in the dialogue going on in their head, may be saying, I guess I'm not alone. So yeah, I do know other people who have gone through this. So normalizing it. I also need to perhaps, and by the way, we don't do these things in order. When I say normalize, simplify, restore resources, add resources, they're in that order because when it comes to teaching the techniques, that's the most logical way to go through them. But when you're actually managing someone else's level of tension, you can start with any one of them. To me, they're all equally useful, powerful, etc., in helping you with whatever it is you're working with at that time. So I could then simplify it. I may very well be able to say, and again, I'm the social worker in the scenario David has come up with. I could say, here, let me give you a roadmap so that you understand how others before you have found their way to the best possible outcome they can hope for under their circumstances. And so when I give someone a roadmap to follow, I haven't moved them from stress down to apathy, but maybe I've taken the edge off. Maybe now they're saying, okay, so just tell me what to do and I'll go ahead and do it. So that they're moving from that to, okay, now I know what I need to do. And so that's going to help move them from stress into power stress. We talk about restoring resources and adding resources. Restoring resources is just reminding a person who's up in stress, who has forgotten that they have the skills that they have and the experience that they've had and all that. They temporarily forget about all the resources that are surrounding them. If we could just help them to become reacquainted with these resources they've always had available to them. And it might be something in the case of adjustment to illness that I could say to them, from what you've shared with me before, you have also helped people who were adjusting to their own illness. What did you learn from that experience? What kinds of things did you say or do? So I might be restoring resources, but probably if it's the first time they've had such a diagnosis, I need to add resources, which could be things like, so I want you to get involved in this particular support group, and we've got this going on for you, and here's a whole bunch of brochures, and here's links to videos galore, and we'd like you to come to our group kind of meetings and blah, blah, blah. There's all kinds of additional resources. As I begin to do each of those 4 downgrade maneuvers in whatever order makes sense, I am going to watch their level of tension go down. My next job is to make sure that their level of tension doesn't go down any further than is ideal for their situation. There's work to be done. There are things they need to do. I need them to be in power, maybe leaning even upgrade a little bit to power stress. So there's a sense of urgency and they're seizing control of their situation. They're being very productive, very active decision-making, and desiring an outcome. Lust is the emotion that is associated with all forms of desire. So get your head out of the gutter. It's all forms of desire. Whatever you want is what this is really all about. We want you to want whatever it is that you need. So power, and maybe upgrade a little bit into power stress is where we really want them to be. So I need to make sure that as I go about working with these downgrade maneuvers, that I don't overshoot the destination. I don't want to normalize it so much. I don't want to give them such a detailed, perfect roadmap. I don't want to restore every resource and give them far more than anyone has ever needed, because what's that going to do is say to them, all right, I guess now that I know that all this stuff is available to me, I can just wait for a while. I can just see how it all goes. We don't want them to disappear or to retreat into their own depression, their own kind of inner world, which is what's going to happen as they move down into apathy. We do know, and I know this is an advanced concept, but we do know that apathy at its worst becomes its own form of stress. And we know that stress at its worst becomes its own form of apathy. So while you're looking at these 5 response states, there are actually 7. So there is apparent apathy, which is actually profound stress. And there is apparent stress, which is actually profound apathy. And so we can get into that. As you guys kind of see, we're moving through this constant movement, upgrade and downgrade, but sometimes we go all the way around, come back in through the other extreme. So if that's a lot, just forget I said all that, but just know that apathy can actually be an unfortunate coping mechanism that's going to result in delay, false hope. I never liked that word, because hope is kind of inherently a thing. When is it false? I get it, but it could certainly be a hope that is unlikely to pan out. But they disappear into that, and then their situation keeps changing. Their disease continues to progress. Their choices become increasingly limited, but they're in deep, deep denial down here. They have that illusion of control. And so at a certain point in time, reality is going to impose itself on this person, and they're going to suddenly skyrocket back up into stress all over again. Have you guys noticed that with any of your clients, or any of you who are just doing this program as it's intended for you to do for yourself to become better in managing your own level of tension? Have you ever seen anyone in your life go into this denial as a way of escaping, only to have an even worse situation waiting for them a bit further down the road?
Yes, my friend who committed suicide, this brings back a lot of memories.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sally. I know that was a very tough time and it's still very fresh, but yeah, this is exactly that mechanism. Keep in mind that apathy has a lot of good points to it. All the levels of tension have good points to them, but they all have a dark side. And when it comes to apathy, that depression ends up coming into play, and that separation from others and relationships and things like that, that isolation, things that comes along with deep, deep apathy. It becomes its own problem. The person feels alienated. Keep in mind, by the way, that even a person up in stress can feel alienated. So it may very well be that they feel like they're the only one. Remember, I said the downgrade maneuvers are normalize, simplify, restore resources, and add resources. What if I was somebody who wanted to manipulate you, who wanted you to relinquish your sense of control over whatever the issue happens to be. And you were going to give me that power now over you. Rather than normalizing what you're going through, I might choose to abnormalize what you're going through. So instead of saying, while this is the first time you've experienced this is something we deal with all the time, normalizing it, you're not alone. Lots of people have walked this path. Instead of normalizing it, if I abnormalize by saying like, this has never happened before. This is unprecedented. This is a level of fear that you should have. You should be so angry. If I'm trying to somehow or another distort the reality to make something that actually is pretty normal, pretty routine. It's been around before. We've dealt with it before. We can deal with it again. Instead of dealing with our stress that way, if I really wanted to manipulate and control you, I would tell you that this is something that we have never faced before. This is totally abnormal. This never should be the way that it is, blah, blah, blah. What I'm doing is I am intentionally adding layers of what I would say, distortion that are going to impact your physical state, your emotional state, your reasoning abilities, all this. Because I know this, as long as I can keep you up in stress and I can keep you as high up in stress as possible, you are that much further away from power, which is where you would see the truth and recognize the options that you have and, get more resourceful, be more logical, more proactive, find the things that you really need to find in order to do that. So rather than normalize, I can abnormalize it. Rather than simplifying it, I can complicate it. I can simply say to you that there are so many pieces that are going on and no one will ever be able to wrap their head around it. It's always going to happen. I want to tell you it's permanent. I want to tell you that it's pervasive. And I do want to tell you that in part, it's because you dropped the ball earlier on. We could have, should have, would have, but you didn't. And so I can end up very much moving this to something where you're the belief is that somehow or another you're responsible for it existing or responsible for continuing unless you relinquish your control to me. And this, by the way, happens in all different levels of life. We see this happen with our business clients all the time. Certainly, we find this inside of rather unhealthy relationships. And by the way, a once in a blue moon kind of trip up into stress, if you're talking with someone that you're near and dear, that's okay. Life is happening, and people are okay to do that. I always say, boarding, being involved in life is like boarding an airplane. So everyone is entitled to a little bit of emotional baggage, but if it doesn't fit in the compartment overhead or under the seat in front of you, you need to check it at the door. And so this is what ends up happening. There's a lot of baggage, there's a lot of whatever, which serves the manipulator very, very well. And by the way, those last two are also true. Rather than restoring resources or adding resources, they might actually want to take resources away from you or to even ensure that you don't discover what the resources are that you could add to what's going on. So just kind of know that this whole world of tension management is neutral in the science. It's how someone ends up applying these techniques that are going to determine whether or not what you've done is good, bad, right, wrong, ethical, unethical, amoral, immoral, whatever. It's how you apply these things. But the mechanism, as I've described it, is most real, and it is something that if you have not encountered it plenty of times up to now, these kinds of things are definitely going to be something you might encounter. Now, again, this is the oracle of the self. So I think it's really important for someone to recognize when they're up in stress, and before they try to do anything about that, what can we teach them to do to move themselves further downgrade? They can normalize, they can simplify, they can certainly resources and at least seek out more resources to add on their own. But it's these beliefs that they need to get past first. So this is not permanent. I don't care what it is. It is not permanent. I don't care what it is not pervasive. And I don't care what it is, you don't need to feel as responsible or guilty as you probably do. I'm not saying you don't have a hand in it. but you are not the shoulders on which the burdens of the world rest. And so if we can help someone get out of those beliefs that hold them back, that alone can lower their level of tension. And to our tension lowering things, we can add all the general stuff that you guys would have rattled off if we didn't regular say, go for a walk, take a nap, administer drugs and alcohol, that'll help. So there's lots of things that we can do to lower, get a massage, take a bubble bath, there's lots of things we can do to lower our own level of tension. You just make sure you do it, because any time you spend up here is going to reinforce your comfort with being up here. And again, last time I'll say it, any decision that you make while up in stress is very, very unlikely to actually be the right decision, the best decision, even a decent decision, because we say decision-making abilities up here are reactive. They're all based on emotions. Those emotions are unresourceful. Any decision that you make that turns out to be right, we will tell you, you've just experienced luck. So you were lucky enough to stumble across something that will work for you, and at least you didn't abandon it. Oftentimes people will be given all the right things to do, but as long as they're up in stress, they're very likely to abandon any kind of a solution and jump to another one that presents itself to them.
And the problem with getting lucky, T, is that you never figure out how that happened.
You don't. And so how can you tap into it the next time you face an issue? This is what we're saying. It's like, people, you have skills. You are already very good tension managers. Any of you who are parents, if you know how to calm down a crying baby, you are a tension manager. So if you know how to get a teenager who's become one with the sofa and is wasting their life away with no ambition, no initiative, if you know how to get them off that sofa and into motion, that's now you're dealing with apathy. You are already a skilled tension manager. So I want you to own the skills that you have developed over the course of your lifetime when it came to managing the levels of tension that other people are experiencing. So if you were in sales or any kind of a job where you needed to influence others, or even you were just trying to influence your coworkers or your friends, your family members to do certain things, all of that it falls into the category of tension management. You just didn't know that, and so we're hoping you could reclaim all of these skills that you've developed one way or another over time. Okay, so that's stress. How many of you have ever found yourself up in stress to such a degree that a lot of time passed on, but nothing really came out of it? Anybody?
I have.
Yeah. So feel free to share details if you.
Well, back in 2015, I had two major clients that were taking up 100% of my time, and they both ended at the same time.
No.
And I had been working literally full time for years on these clients and hadn't reached out to anybody.
Right.
So I was starting all over again, and that was stressful.
Very stressful. And so what did you do to move yourself more into power stress? What did you do?
I joined the Circle of Brilliance.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for the commercial. Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, look, anyone.
No, coaching always helps, T, and hearing it from others, especially you, always helps. It brings me into focus. It gives me resources. It's very useful.
Yeah, and I'm certainly glad that that people can tap into things. T, go ahead, throw in what you'd like to add to that.
Oh, I was just going to say, when I'm up in stress, I don't know where I got this, but I know I use it when I do strategic planning. What's the worst thing that can happen? What's the best thing? And what's the most likely? And it could be any of those.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
and none of them are just perfect. So, and I think I got some of that from Dale Carnegie. So, when you think about normalize and simplify, it gets you into thinking of a different focus, or not a different focus, but focusing it in a way that you can even see it.
Right.
But sometimes you just can't see it.
Well, you can't because, it's the whole thing about, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. You might be so close to this issue, and the issue could be so big that you become unable to see it. So, because it's just so big in front of you, all you do is see this little tiny bit and it feels like a big void that you're in. So we got to be able to step back. And one of the greatest things that comes out of power, and again, if I open up like the change grid, if you can get yourself to the center of the change grid, then you can actually detach yourself from the situation. You can look at it objectively. You can acknowledge feelings without feeling them. You can acknowledge whatever the facts, figures, truth happens to be without feeling anything about it. Just acknowledge that X is true. And after a period of time, getting yourself to this PowerPoint, it becomes a very resourceful place. Now, as your guys' training goes on, sooner or later, I'm going to tell you that in addition to the upgrade, downgrade, in-grid, and out-grid maneuvers, there's also PowerPoint maneuvers. There are things that every single one of you have already developed for yourself that gets you to this centered place and can get you there inside of a matter of seconds. It's different for everybody, but everyone has some sort of PowerPoint maneuver. Some things you go, while chaos is happening all around me, I can get myself to a good place. And whether you do that, what's that?
Sometimes I feel like that because I tend to do or have a lot of things on my plate, and I try to figure out which one is more important. Hence the reason I'm doing this is because I need to prioritize things so that I can focus better on things that need to be done sooner than the other things. But I find that hard because I'm
well, and let me explain why it can sometimes be hard, because obviously in the situation that Sally has just described, what you're really trying to do is to prioritize the different values of different things that need to be done. And if you're in the center of the change grid, that could lend itself to the creation of a sequence of events that needs to be done. So for example, the rule is, and this rule, there's no way to escape it. People pay attention to where they find their tension. So no matter what you're doing on a given day, if something comes along and rears its ugly head, if it's going to move you up grid, you are going to pay increasingly greater amounts of attention to it. People pay attention to where they find their tension. And so in your particular situation, Sally, you might have something on that list where someone is demanding something. There's lots of pressure, deadlines, whatever it is it materials? Is it staffing? Is the weather cooperating? All kinds of things. And that could pull your attention up into those activities, when in fact, the remedy to these activities is actually found downgrid in one of these other things that, while they're not causing you all this stress, if you can just get them done, they are going to help you get a whole lot of other things taken care of. But am I going to make the time to do these things? Am I going to say, while my tension is commanding me to pay attention to these upgrade issues, what I really need to do is pause for a second. I need to sharpen my axe. I need to do whatever it is that I need to do to take care of some of these downgrade issues, which I can then use as very powerful assets and resources to more effectively deal with these upgrade sorts of issues. So does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, but because we're not paying attention, or no, because we pay attention to tension, by the end of the day, we run out of time and energy. We'd put it all towards these upgrade issues. What's waiting for us next day? The downgrade issues, and they can keep waiting and waiting and waiting. But all of these things that are plotting downgrid represent assets, resources that you could be using to help you with these more upgrade kinds of issues. Thoughts about that, David?
Sounds counterintuitive, T.
It is counterintuitive, and that's why, sometimes we, the work that we do with clients, we say, those who aren't familiar with the world of ChangeWorks and being a ChangeWorks professional, sometimes we say to our clients, what you need more than anything else is to set aside a day for the great downgrid cleanup day. And on that day, you are going to turn off the phones. You are going to turn off everything that's non-essential, and you're going to clean up all this mess of little to-do items. And look what you're saying about all those things that are downgrade. I definitely have the ability to do it. It's not all that challenging, but I'm in power apathy where I wish someone else would do it, or I'm in apathy where I don't even care if anybody else does it. And so we have to sometimes do something very deliberate. And we call that, because we're trying to keep things nice and fun, the Great Downgrade Cleanup Day. And maybe what you really need on a more on an ongoing basis is maybe you need to just have every day the Great Downgrade Cleanup Hour. Or once a week, you need the great cleanup, the great downgrade cleanup, what couple of hours, lunch and whatever. You got to clean up the mess.
It's like doing the administration. Nobody wants to do that.
Nobody wants to do it, but it's not.
Nobody wants to do the book work.
Yeah, one of the most powerful things I was ever told, and it was not told to me like it was supposed to be sage wisdom. It was basically a command that was issued to me, and I took it as the command intended, but I also thought, this is powerful. And this is what the person said to me. I was asked to do something that I could do, but I just didn't want to do it. And sooner or later, it had to be done. And the person said to me, if you can't get rid of it, get on with it. And the thought that all these tasks that are downgrade are always looming over your head. And so they end up causing you far more anxiety, far more issues than if you had just got rid of them. So if you can't get rid of something that's on your plate, then just get on with it and get it over and done with. And
yeah, T, I would give you the example of my wife filling in her timesheets. That is a very mundane, boring, routine, unsatisfying, difficult activity. So what the firm did was they put together an app that's on every attorney's phone that allows them to enter their time on their phone.
Yeah, thank you. And what's level of compliance now with using that app? Did the lawyers adopt it rather quickly, or?
Yep, no, high.
Yeah, it needs to be, because I can tell you about myself, and many of you on the phone are in the same situation I'm in. I sell time. And so for a lot of my clients, particularly my consulting clients, the time that they need is like an hour here and 15 minutes there. It's kind of more, I don't know, organic. It's almost like I've become kind of an extension of their management team. So they don't think that they need to isolate what they want to talk to me about into a once a week hour session or whatever. No, they just call me whenever. So I learned the hard way that if I don't immediately write down the day and the time and who I talked to and what we talked about, by the end of the month, we only send them a bill once a month. By the end of the month, I'm going to go like, I know I talked to them. When did I talk to them? And then I'm digging through emails or digging through my phone records, trying to figure out the date and time I actually talked to them and reconstruct it all. Any idea how much time that takes? I feel like I've lost a fortune. Yeah, I've lost a fortune just because of things I forgot happened and didn't bill them for. So, yeah. All right, so we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I hope you guys are enjoying this. No one's dropping off the call. That's always a good sign. I do want to tell you that what my intention was for today was to just make sure that you guys understood that being way up in stress is not the place to be when it comes to you applying the techniques we're talking to you about. You got to get yourself out of stress first. Similarly, if you do have a situation, you're down in apathy about it, you got to recognize when you're in apathy, so you can at least pause for a moment and say, is that serving me well, or do I need to get myself in motion? I need to get myself upgrid. And
I always call that being in a funk.
Being in a funk. Yeah,
boy, when you're in a funk, nothing gets done.
Right. Well, and people talk about burnout. They don't realize that they think burnout is a stress response, but burnout also comes from apathy. So if you have me doing the same job the same way for too long, sooner or later, I'm telling you, I'm going to go on to autopilot. And so that's equally bad. It's just, kind of the opposite situation. I don't feel like I'm being buried. I don't feel like I'm being challenged enough in the case of the people that are down in apathy. You guys need to recognize when you are in these modes, because as long as you are in this apathy mode, you're going to continue to do all the things that apathy does. And that's not a whole lot. Unproductive, illusion of control, perceived availability of resources is unlimited, which is never the case. Decision-making is turned off. You know, this isn't helping you. This isn't helping you. So if you find yourself down in apathy about something, I'm not saying you have to change it. I'm saying you need to stop for just a moment and ask yourself, is this serving me well? If it is, do a happy dance and move on. But if it isn't, we got to move you up grid. And so we'll be exploring upgrade maneuvers as well. How do you move yourself up grid and downgrade? And again, while we're only talking about these 5 levels of tension right now, keep in mind there's also in-grade and out-grade. Sometimes you can be too far way out here to the right, and sometimes you can be too far way over here to the left. You got to know when that's happening so you can do the right thing to help there. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do on today's call, but we'll save it for our next session, is I wanted to revisit the path of self-discovery that we introduced you to on the last coaching session. But rather than just go through it again, I wanted to say, I want you guys to actually do this as an exercise to help me create the activity list for the next group ChangeWorks profile. So that profile is all about relationships. And so what I wanted to do is say to you, when it comes to, having the relationships that you need, so when it comes to relationships in your life, I want you to walk the path of self-discovery. What is your current situation? So who are you? Who is your primary relationship? Who are your family members? Who are your closest friends? Who are the coworkers or people you need to interact with, and whatever it happens to be? It could be because you're involved in some sort of a business or a club or whatever. So what's the current situation? And then when you think about that current situation, I'm sure a lot of it is probably just fine, but maybe some of it you'd like to modify. Maybe there are missing relationships or relationships that are no longer serving you well. And so you have to get into the desired situation. If you could, how would you change these relationships so that they were more along the lines of what you would want them to be? So if you know where you're at and you know where you want to go, even when it comes to something in terms of relationships, and by the way, we're talking right now about relationships in general. Keep in mind, if you were coming to us as a client and you were having difficulty in your primary relationship, we'd just say, let's just look at the primary relationship. What's going on right now? What do you want it to, how do you want it to be different? If it's a relationship with a family member, we could isolate it and just say, well, tell me what's going on with that and what do you want? So you can apply this in very general kinds of ways. You can get very specific, and that'll serve you well as well. But once you know where you're at and where you want to go, the question becomes, what's stopping that from happening? Once you know these obstacles, then you can say, and what's my strategy? What's my approach? How am I going to get these obstacles out of the way so I can get to my desired outcome? And then we'll worry about the feelings. But again, on the path, if we start off with feelings, well, if those feelings are stress or apathy, we got problems and we haven't even started the real work of change. So we got to make sure that we don't let the feelings and all that internal stuff get in the way of you doing the work that really needs to be done if you ever hope to feel something different than what you're feeling right now. So with this idea about white, green, black, red, current situation, desired situation, obstacles, and solution. As you start to flesh this out, you end up generating an activity list. So when it comes to your goals, you could say something like spend more time with my children. Okay, that's a goal. What's stopping that from happening? And it could be something about that you've got other obligations that interfere with the time that they were available. Well, then how are we going to overcome that? The answers to these obstacles, removing this obstacle, overcoming this obstacle, that is a plottable activity for a change grid. Spending more time with my kids, having a deeper, more meaningful relationship with my significant other. These can all be put on a change grid and we can see what's going on with your level of tension. Now, if you were working with us one-on-one, we would have you start to fill this all out. And again, I'm going to chat this over to everyone just so you have fresh copies of all of these. I've sent them to you before. But there you go. And here's where you'd actually plot an activity list. So I've just chatted those over to everybody. But from that, or during that discussion, you might start saying things like, well, I need to carve out time for date night. Carving out time for date night, that's the activity. Or something that says, I need to maintain open channels of communication with my family members. I don't know what your personal activity list is going to be until we walk through the path. Similarly, if you're going to be using this as the oracle of the self is intended, you need to get comfortable taking yourself on your own path walk. And you need to become comfortable, maybe not right away, but down the road, in turning that into an activity list that you can use to explore what's going on with your productive tension. I will promise you this. Yes, go ahead,
I think
David.
the other important thing is recognizing what level of tension you're starting at, because if you're up in stress, your ability to gather white hat facts is going to be compromised.
Exactly right. And that's why we say, you have to manage your own level of tension before you try to do any definitive change kind of work. So I understand it. We've all got things going on in our life that are not as we wish they were, whatever. I believe we have the ability to influence, if not change, a great many of those things, but not if we're up in stress or down in apathy. We need to get to a healthier level of tension so that we can do these 4 more logical steps of the process and really figure out where we're at, where are we trying to go, what's in our way, and how am I going to get over those obstacles and get to where I want to go. So this is the logical stuff. If we have every one of these being somehow or another governed by my emotions and my instincts and my intuition, it's going to compromise, if not stop dead in its tracks, the logical process that is the only way I'm actually going to find the solutions that I say, at least, that I so desperately want. So I will promise you guys that if you get nothing else out of this program, if you would just learn to walk the path of self-discovery, anytime you find yourself in a situation where a decision needs to be made, or at least it needs to be looked at in greater detail, you just say, I need to walk the path, walk the path, walk the path. Walking the path is in and of itself its own downgrade maneuver. If you are up in stress and you say, I'm going to walk the path, and you do these 4 steps, you will no longer be up in stress. You will be in a much healthier place that's going to help you to more quickly identify the right things to do and increase the likelihood that you'll follow through and do it. So emotions are not our friends. We have them for a reason, but if you can't learn how to recognize and control the emotional state, the rest of what you're doing in life is going to be undermined. And so this is where emotional intelligence comes into play. I think some of you on the call have actually taught emotional intelligence. That's really what it's all about. Emotional intelligence is about being able to acknowledge feelings without being governed by them. It's about being mindful, be in the moment, see what's really going on, but separate yourself from that so that you can do the things that really need to be done. And so these are all good ways to help you move into a better place. Just this act alone is a very, very empowering and useful thing. And when you move to the levels of activity list creation, I can't begin to tell you how often clients have said to us that just breaking it into activities was so useful to them, so helpful to them. And it's like they haven't even done a change grid yet. But there they are, knowing like, no, but now I know what it is that needs to be done. So even the steps of this Oracle of the Self process can be very, very valuable to you, even if you don't take it all the way through to the final step of looking at a change grid and putting together appropriate action plans based on your change grid results. Okay, so with that, I'd like you guys to unmute, if you will. Just tell me, are you enjoying this? Is this interesting to you? Are you getting benefits? Yes?
Absolutely.
Absolutely fascinating.
I'm so glad you're enjoying it, Tom. Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh,
Yes,
yes.
thank you, T.
Yeah, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Okay, so fine. I will also say to you guys, if you want to participate in the Circle of Brilliance, you're welcome to do that. Our doors to the Circle of Brilliance are wide open, and it's a free sort of thing. Think of it as coffee with people with really good minds, and we do it twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at the same time, 11 a.m. Our time, which right now is 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But it's a bunch of professionals from all different kinds of professions, and we explore just different things about human behavior. We put our results up on YouTube. I think there's at least 100 hours worth of our conversations up there already. So if you'd like to do that, feel free to send us an email or a text message, and we'll make sure that you get the registration link to participate on those calls. So with that, thank you all very much for joining in. Soon you will have another Change Grid profile to fill out based on relationships, but I'd like you guys to participate in the actual creation of that activity list. So with that, talk to you again soon. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.